wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, Seahawks fans. Welcome back to another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with Keith Myers. And we just hit a big, huge wall of reality today, didn't we?
We did. This team just isn't good. They're not. I mean, we thought they had a chance to be really good, and they started off the season really good on offense. The defense had some struggles, and the defense got it figured out, but the offense was a mess because Russell Wilson was hurt. Now Russell Wilson's back, and the offense hasn't been fixed, even with the quarterback. It's still a complete mess, and because of injuries, the defense is starting to fall back off to where they were. Basically, what that means is they're not good on either side of the ball. They're 3-8. They're not going anywhere.
Well, you got to hand it to the defense. It is. They're doing the best they can, but they're literally on the field for more than half of the the offense is on the field for less than half of the snaps of the opposing teams.
Yeah. So there's two parts to that. One is the defense can't get off the field. They're giving up third down after third down after third down, which leads to 8-minute drives and, all that kind of stuff. And then the other part is that the offense is such a mess all of a sudden that even against a mediocre defense with their two best pass rushers not even there playing because they're out with injuries. They couldn't protect Russell Wilson at all. They couldn't run block to save their lives. And so the offense did nothing. And it went, what was it? I think at one point there was like 6 straight 3-and-outs by the offense. I mean, that can't
5
happen.
or 6. Yeah.
So Wilson's playing poorly. The line's playing worse. The running backs didn't get anything done. But of course, there were no running lanes to go through. And DK Metcalf had one catch.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it just, nothing's working. It's the whole thing's bad. So
yeah, it is crazy. I mean, speaking of DK Metcalf, just the last 3 weeks, he's got 8 catches for 70 yards. The end. One catch yesterday, a few catches the week before, and so forth. Primary receiver, guy that's a matchup problem for almost every corner in the entire league. And
4 targets, 1 catch, 13 yards.
Yeah. So we all saw it, at least most people that are hanging around, at this point in the season. We're 3-8 now. You're right. Mathematically, technically, we're not completely out of it, but we're out of it.
They're out of it.
They just can't. This. They're not a good enough team to win out. Mm-hmm. And they're it is what it is. Okay.
Even when Russell Wilson put together kind of that crazy miraculous drive at the end, got him, the score. They missed the extra point, the 2-point conversion. So they were down 2. They managed to recover an onside kick.
Yes.
To get him in position to win the game, despite playing terribly the whole game. And the captain of the special teams couldn't even line up.
That was the hard part to swallow.
Could not even line up correctly. And it wasn't just like
he was cheating. He was over like 1.5 feet or 2 feet over of the point where he should have been.
He's the captain of the special teams.
And the interesting thing about that is he had the hash marks that he knew he had to be on the other side of. Like he was literally standing on them.
He's standing on them. So right. What are you doing?
Your brain is literally not functioning is what's happening. Or he's hoping nobody's going to realize
if you're going to be the captain of the special teams unit, you can't do that. And that's the only reason he is on the roster is because he is a special teams guy. Like otherwise he would have no place on this roster.
All right. So I get that. And I feel like that's nitpicking when we don't even have to. Like there's so many other things that are just
No, I mean
more important than just that. That's just but that typifies the whole situation.
Nick Bellore has no business on this roster if he's not going to be the special teams star.
I think we can name a number of players now that have no business to be on this roster.
Yeah, we can.
We've reached that point.
Let's start with Rashad Penny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we know that. I'm not going to harp on a player. We've known that he's not going to be on the team next year.
No.
We've reached the point, and we can talk about this Washington game a little bit or whatever, work it into the conversation. But we've kind of reached a point where we're in player evaluation mode now.
Yeah,
everything that we are seeing now up through training camp next year is all about who's going to be on the roster, who can show out a little bit right now in the games remaining. What are they going to do in the off season? What are they going to build around? How are they going to build the roster? What kind of draft capital do they have? What kind of free agency money are they going to spend? Who is going to be leading the team? Is it going to be John Schneider? Is it going to be Pete Carroll? Is Russell Wilson going to be back? Are all three of those elements going to be somewhere else? We just don't know at this point. But, for us, it's that time of the year, I think, where normally we wait until the season's over and we start these sorts of conversations. We're starting them now.
Well, we have no reason not to. I mean, the games from here on out, I mean, they matter to the players because they earn, their paychecks and their jobs and stuff are on the line. It'll matter for some of the coaches who are playing for coaching for their job at this point. But for us, these games don't matter. They're not.
It's over. The season's over. It's so bad, Keith, that which is just almost impossible to actually have my brain comprehend. Our original first round pick that we traded away for Jamal Adams is actually the better of the two picks that the Jets have in the 2022 NFL draft. We are the fourth pick in the NFL draft, and the Jets have their native fifth pick overall right now if the season were to end.
Yeah.
So that's how bad it is.
They would have the fourth and the fifth pick in the draft.
Yes.
They've already got their quarterback.
Well, some are saying maybe. Some are saying maybe they'd be interested in trading for Russell Wilson and shipping they already have their quarterback guy to Seattle plus picks. Okay. I'm just saying we're going to hear a lot of this.
If you want to send me Zach Wilson and both of those picks and some other stuff, I'll listen.
Yeah, because New York wants to win now. They've got a new coach that's new as of last year. They've got some pieces. They're definitely a quarterback plus away. We know that, but it's a New York market, and it makes a lot of sense. Now, let's set this up, okay? Because we could start talking about Russell Wilson rumors from now until March,
and I don't want to.
We need to kind of identify if it's going to be a Russell Wilson team or if it's going to be a Pete Carroll team, or if they're going to give this thing one more shot. And now here's going into that last game against Washington. I thought, based on the idea that maybe they turn things around a little bit here and start to go on a little run and improve the offense, and everything kind of gets more balanced, and we end the season kind of on a positive note, you could do a small kind of reset in the offseason, similar to what we did on the defensive side in 2017. You go in and you rebuild the offensive line, you add a running back and maybe another weapon, and the offense looks pretty decent. It could actually, with Russell Wilson at the helm, you could kind of correct that thing. And then you tweak the back end on the defense, maybe a defensive tackle, bingo, everything kind of good. It seems like we'd be in that competitive mix again. Now with this loss and the trend of it doesn't look like it's going to get any better, and Russell Wilson, I don't know what's going on there. We can talk about that. It seems like it's more significant. Significant changes need to happen now. It's almost the writing's on the wall. Pete Carroll's going to be gone, or Russell Wilson's going to be gone. it's like it's one or the other.
See, I don't.
Are you of that? You're not of that opinion.
I do not think that it's one or the other. Now they may choose to move on from Wilson because he's on. He's older than 30, and the team's just bad. And if you can get Zach Wilson, both the fourth and fifth pick of the draft, and
the Giants pieces are in the same boat. See, the Giants have the same sort of picks. Philadelphia has the same sort of picks. They've got 2 picks right now in the top 10.
Yeah, and both
New Orleans needs a quarterback, and you could kind of have a 3-team kind of scenario with New Orleans in there. There's some scenarios now, and you take a look at the draft being just quarterback poor, and free agency being quarterback poor after you get past Rodgers. The demand for Russell Wilson is probably going to even be higher this season, considering his contract's less and so forth than it was last season.
Yeah, last year there were 5 first-round quarterbacks, 5 genuinely worthy first-round quarterbacks. This year, there might be 2 taken in the first round, but there aren't any that anyone should be jumping up and down at the excitement of getting. There's no There's no
including the Seahawks. So if we jettison Russell Wilson, we're in a year of pain without a real quarterback at the helm. Now, there's a number of middling kind of quarterbacks that could come in. You could even go out and try to get Aaron Rodgers if you wanted to. I don't know why that they would do that. It would cost almost the same as it would for Russell Wilson. So
the only way you would do that is if you
you rebuild everything but quarterback and you go for 2023.
Or if you trade Wilson and you get, like, let's say they trade him to the Jets and they get both of those picks and a future one and some other things and whatever, and then you go, okay, with the fourth overall pick, they get Kayvon Thibodeau to be like a super stud on the defensive line, and then they turn around with the 5th overall pick and they pick a left tackle, a franchise left tackle. So now you've just made both the line of scrimmage is significantly better.
Now, what would John Schneider do? Now we've heard what you're going to do. What would John Schneider do with those 2 picks?
I don't know. When the last time that John Schneider had 2
upper and first round picks, he did quite well. Actually.
He went with Russell Okung, who has been a pretty dang good left tackle in the NFL for a long time still. And then Earl Thomas, who was an All-Pro and probably
with Seattle, he was great.
Yeah, with Seattle, was a first ballot Hall of Famer, and then it sounds like stuff fell apart for him off the field, and that became a mess. But
we haven't seen John Schneider draft early for a decade.
Yeah, and I think we're in this position.
I would think that they would use one of those picks, and he would probably trade out of another one just to see.
Even if he traded
what he
down,
could accumulate.
Let's say he traded down from 4, you could trade down to 8. You get a bucket of picks and stuff.
Absolutely.
And could really make in the top 10.
You could really set this up if you did it correctly and you had some luck and all sorts of things by letting Russell Wilson go, but then you don't have Russell Wilson. Now there's a lot of people, and I'm not going to listen to the idea that Russell Wilson's baked, it's over, he's on the downside, blah, 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 blah. I don't know what's going on right now. It seems like something maybe even outside of football is impacting this situation that we just don't even know about.
I won't even speculate about that.
It's not just the finger, though, Keith.
No, it's not the finger. What it is the fact that you watch his eyes. Watch his eyes. When they do the replays and they show it from the front where you can see it, his eyes aren't downfield. His eyes are on the pass rushers because he doesn't trust the people in front of him.
Not even. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to give you a little bit of that. I'm going to give you a little bit of that. His eyes aren't
downfield because there were multiple times.
Yeah, there are also multiple times where he's got a clear path. He doesn't have the rush at that particular play, and he's missing people. Both are true.
There were multiple times in this game where he couldn't even reach the top of his drop. It's a 5-step drop. He's got to get there and get the ball out of his hands, and he can't even.
You and I both know that the offensive line is not good.
before he's getting clobbered. So you know what happens when that happens is
you start to see ghosts.
Well, it's not even ghosts. He's seeing the people who are attacking him.
But what I'm saying is there are plays, Keith, where he has time and he's missing receivers.
And you know why he has time, but he's missing receivers is because he's not looking downfield and reading all of the coverage. He's got his first read and he's watching the pass rush because he's like, where am I going to get killed from this play? So even though
our pass rush, based on all the other years that he's had in the NFL with the Seattle Seahawks, is the worst offensive line we've ever had, to the point where it's the worst offense. Before, we used to say that Russell Wilson had a floor of 9 wins.
Okay.
And now it's not even that. Are you saying that the offensive line is so bad that the floor is now 5 wins?
Okay. Part of it is that Russell Wilson, it started last year down the stretch, and it's happened, in this year, and a lot of it really actually started the year before. He's so uncomfortable in the pocket and just dropping back to pass. He doesn't trust anything. And that's why nothing's working. And I know, like I was saying, he's just not reading the defense.
Yeah.
Well, he's not reading the defense. He's not looking downfield because he can't, because he doesn't trust the people.
I have a tendency to believe what you're saying. In fact, I tweeted about it last week, where I said I believe that the real root cause of the problem of the offense being really bad this year is the offensive line. I still believe that that's true. It's just now I'm not sure, because I saw him at Washington in a pass rush situation that wasn't completely overwhelming by any standard, and he was still missing quite a bit.
You're asking him to drop back on that one instance when the offensive line does its job, and to trust the offensive line to do its job so that he can go through his reads properly. When it's one time out of 10 or one time out of 15 that he drops back and actually has protection. And so when he drops back, he's not looking downfield. He's watching the pass. He's looking at the pass rush. He's cheating, looking at guys coming at him, trying to figure out where the pressure's coming from.
Okay.
And that's the root of the problem.
Fine, Keith. Okay, fine. So let's say that is the problem. Then it's on Seattle's coaching staff to create a game plan each week that mitigates that situation. And we're not seeing that either.
Well, you saw a game plan against Washington that tried to mitigate.
We ran the ball 10 times, Keith.
You're right. And for how many yards?
And we only ran 43 plays.
So they ran the ball.
We had 18 minutes of possession.
They ran the ball 10 times for 18 yards. They averaged 1.8 yards per carry. They couldn't run the ball. Every time they ran the ball, they got stuffed at the line of scrimmage, or just barely past, or behind the line of scrimmage. Running the ball, which should be what you do to help your quarterback in this situation, was a completely worthless scenario because they couldn't block anyone.
So they can't block, they can't run, they can't throw.
Yeah. And that's the thing. The offensive line is playing so bad, they can't run block. And honestly, they're not pass blocking. So
so what should we be? Now we've gotten all that out. We've been able to kind of get that out of our system now. So
I want to say one other thing about the game plan, because who was the biggest benefactor of the game plan as it was constructed? It's Carl Everett. It was Carl Everett.
Not Carl Everett, Gerald Everett.
Gerald Everett. Why do I keep doing that?
I don't know.
It was Gerald Everett. So because everything was, a 3 or a 5-step drop, get the ball out of Russell's hands quickly. And that's why DK Metcalf wasn't involved, and it took forever to get him the ball, and all of that was because everything was out of Wilson's hands as fast as humanly possible. And the only person who's getting open in that 3-step drop is the tight end, because the running back hasn't made it out of the backfield yet, and the receivers are getting jammed at the line, and haven't had a chance to release before the ball's going. Everett got all the targets, and that's game planning. I mean, he had 9 targets.
Yeah, and
that's more than all the
converted 4 of 12 third downs. They were 2 of 10 against Arizona. They've had 271 yards against Washington, 266 against Arizona, 208 against the Packers. The NFL average is over 325.
Yeah, they
are second in the NFL, second worst in the NFL at 295 yards a game.
They can't run the ball, which is something they need to do in order to slow some of the pass rush down and get to where they can, even if they move the pocket and that sort of thing, they got to give your receivers a chance to get open, and they're not doing that. So they can't run the ball, and they can't pass block.
Let's do this. We realize
they've broken Russell Wilson at this point.
Let's do this. This is essentially over. Season's over.
It is over.
What can we get out of the remaining 6 games that will help the franchise move forward?
They have got to figure out one of the 2 tackle spots. You've got Jake Curran, who looked great in the preseason, hasn't looked good during very limited playing time, but he's only got like 10 or 15 snaps total. And you have Stone Forsythe on the other side. You've got to get one of those guys in the game. Now, right now, I would say you get Curran in the game at right tackle because he's your future at right tackle. Let him play. Let him because Shell's not doing anything for him on that side. So go ahead and put Curran in there. Give Curran a chance to play so you can evaluate him and figure out if he can be there long term. And if he is possible to be there long term, give him some playing time, a chance to develop, because that's the type of thing where you can go into the offseason and go, okay, we're jettisoning Shell. We want a right tackle, but if we have to come in with some sort of journeyman and a competition between him and Curran, we're comfortable with that. But if Curran's not going to be that guy, if the guy that we saw in the preseason and all that just isn't he's never going to live up to that and develop into a full-time player, you want to know that now.
Yes.
So you know what your true priorities are. So I think you have to figure out one of the 2 tackle spots, either Forsythe or Curran, depending on which side you want to roll with, or both. But I wouldn't jettison Brown yet, just for Russell Wilson's sake, because he's
but you can give Forsythe 2 or 3 drives a game.
You can, yeah. Find some reason to get him in there. I would also say, you got to look at what you've got at center, because you know that the 2 guys that are there, neither of them is any good. So what's Shepley got? If
Shepley or Pierre
Lestage,
yeah, why not?
Pierre Olivier Lesage.
There you go.
Such a good name.
You've been working on that.
I actually have been ever since the draft. It's such a fun name. But I would say, do you want 3 rookies playing on the offensive line?
You're going to have 3 new offensive linemen next year.
Hopefully,
one of them is going to be a
Jackson.
vet.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. Do you want to go into a game with an offensive lineman of Forsythe, Lewis, Shepley, Jackson, and Curran? No, because that will be a cause for Russell Wilson to say, "Screw this, get me out of here."
Yeah,
I don't want to.
You got to have at least a veteran left tackle, I think, or
that's why I was saying center. That's why I was saying Curran earlier. Leave Brown in there for as long as you can. Maybe get Forsythe a drive or 2. But Shell hasn't played well. He hasn't been good. So go ahead and get him out of there. Put Curran in there and evaluate him. The drop off from Shell to Curran is so small, because Shell's not playing well, that I don't think anyone's going to notice. And you'll at least give a chance to evaluate a young player and see if he can be part of the future.
Yeah. I'd like to see Colby Parkinson too at tight end. Like what's going on there? Like, I don't I'm just confounded by the lack of plays that we've had. I think that makes it extremely difficult to evaluate and to be successful. We just haven't been successful. We haven't had the plays to be able to get some of these guys opportunities and so forth. Colby Parkinson's a good example. It's like this guy should have 30 or 40 receptions with his skill set, and he's not even able to get on the field.
Snaps. He's not getting the snaps because they're going with Disley, who's the better blocker, and rightfully so, because they need that. And they're going with Everett, who is a guy that knows the offense and has been a genuine weapon.
I don't have a problem with that.
And they're not going to run 3 tight ends too often because they've got the receivers. And so
beyond
he's kind of the odd man out.
Beyond what we just talked about, there's really nothing on the active roster that I would want to see.
I want to see Johnson at running back. The guy's got good hands catching the ball out of the backfield, especially in a game like this one where Travis Homer was hurt and out. And, get a guy like Johnson in there. Just see what you've got.
We just literally ran the ball 10 times. I mean, we need to figure out a way to get time of possession up to at least 30 minutes a game. I mean, geez,
do you even consider that running the ball when you get 18 yards on 10 rushes?
Here's what we need to do. We need to try to evaluate regardless of production at this point. We just kind of need to run our plays just to be able to run certain looks, certain scheme looks, and so forth. I don't know. It's hard because you still have a coaching staff that may not have a vested interest in being around next year. I don't know. It's just hard because they're the ones doing the evaluating, yet they may not be the ones having the players in the future. I don't
see know. If Pete Carroll was going to leave, because I do think that it's Pete Carroll's decision if he leaves. It's a situation where he's done enough that he's earned the benefit of the doubt, and he can have one bad year, and he'll still be around. So the idea that he's going to get fired, I think, is not even like worth considering, because I think that's just, it's never going to happen, not after 1 year. But if Pete Carroll was going to leave, I look at it as the SEC job just got filled. Lincoln Riley's moving over from Oklahoma to USC. And that was one of the things that I thought I would have seen if he wanted out of Seattle. And it's like, you know what, I'm done with this, but maybe I'm not done coaching, to go back down to college where he, was extremely successful, to rebuild a program that he had as being one of the elite programs anywhere, and then has kind of just fallen downhill since he left, to go back and fix it for 3 or 4 years before he retires. That was the job that I thought he might opt to leave for, but it's no longer there. And so I think that idea, he either has to decide he wants to retire, decide that he wants to retire from the day-to-day grind of coaching and just handle, the president of football operations half of his job, or he's going to be back.
So here's the situation for me. If he's going to be back, I don't have a problem with it. Here's what I have a problem with. If he's going to be back and continue the same sort of stuff, that's the problem.
Yeah.
If he's going to come back, he needs to go be the bully. He needs to have that aggressive mentality. He wants to dictate terms. He wants to be physical. He wants to control the clock. He wants to run the ball down people's throats. Let's build a team like that.
If he wants to do that, then
he wants to do all that stuff, but we've not aligned that vision with what's happening with the draft, what's happening in free agency.
If you want to do that,
aligned.
If you want to do that, stop going bargain basement on your offense and defensive line. Go win in the trenches. Go
absolutely.
Go spend the money, win in the trenches, and stop paying overpriced safeties
and drafting Dwayne Eskridge. I'm sorry, I like the idea of a Dwayne Eskridge, but that's a luxury pick when you needed a center of the future that could take you down the road 10 years.
Yeah. And they had one. It was sitting right there. They could have drafted. Right. They could have had a center in there who.
So name me a player on the current roster that is the intimidator, that is the intimidating factor, that is the identity of this team. There is no identity on offense or defense. It's not even Darrell Taylor.
The only player on the roster that fits that to me.
Or Jordan Brooks has got some,
Jordan Brooks actually
a little bit.
He has really stepped up his game,
but
and is playing at a really high level.
They're giving up so many yards. It's hard to know. There's really no intimidating factor.
Jordan Brooks is playing at,
no other team is saying, "Oh my God, we're facing the Seahawks."
No, on either side of the ball.
No.
Jordan Brooks is playing at a really high level. Bobby Wagner has all the respect of every player and coach in the entire league. Continues to lead the NFL in tackles and all of that. I think he can continue to be a fantastic, great player for another couple of years.
Let's talk about that. But his cap number next year is 20.
And
they could save $17 million if they let Bobby Wagner go.
He does not have the speed he used to, and it shows up.
That contract is going to be either reworked or Bobby Wagner's not playing for the Seattle Seahawks next year.
That's what's going to happen. As I believe they'll find a 2-year extension that lowers his cap number from 20 million to 13, frees up some money.
Yes.
And they'll take that $7 million and go, buy a right tackle or something.
And they should.
Yeah, and that's
or a defensive tackle.
And the thing is,
let's keep that money on defense. Let's go get a defensive tackle because we need both.
Because if you Jordan Brooks has improved throughout this season. He is playing some really good football.
He's one of the
very few people on defense.
They're not getting enough protection at the defensive line. They're making all of their tackles 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage, which is great for their stats. And they're good at diagnosing plays and stuff. They just have to run through a bunch of traffic to make those plays usually. Yeah, and Bobby Wagner is not the same physical guy that he used to be. He sometimes gets washed out, and it's not his fault. The defense needs to be able to create openings for Bobby to fill, and he's just having to fight through a bunch of stuff before he makes tackles.
Bobby Wagner leads the NFL with 128 combined tackles. Jordan Brooks is 5th.
Yeah. No surprise. Yeah.
The two guys, both of those guys are playing really well. And I don't think that Jordan Brooks is getting the credit for being as good as he's been this year. But they're not getting any help. I got to tell you, the player that's probably the most disappointing on the defense to me has been Carlos Dunlap.
Kerry Hyder.
Yeah,
what has he done? Like last year was great.
Yeah,
Kerry Hyder had like 5 sacks in the last 6 games for the 49ers.
True, but he wasn't. He was never a dominant player up front. He was never a guy that required a double team or any of that stuff. He was a guy that was playing because of injury, and other people were disruptive, and he was cleaning up at when a quarterback was running for their life and that kind of stuff. Yeah, and he was, and that's who Kerry Hyder is. He's not super disruptive,
but he even hasn't done that very well in this defense.
There hasn't been that much for him to clean up.
I think our defensive ends are solid defensive ends, but they need that protection of double team.
Well, and Carlos
in the middle.
And Carlos Dunlap was the guy who last year commanded a double team and made everyone else better. And this year I think he's got 1 sack, 9 tackles, and just has not been productive in any way. He's just taking up space and not even doing a great job of eating blocks. They're getting nothing out of him. And he was a guy that was supposed to be key for this defense. And, you can hear it in Pete Carroll's comments that they want to get Darrell Taylor and Alton Robinson more snaps because those two guys are at least playing hard. And Darrell Taylor's been super disruptive. Alton Robinson has been disruptive at times. Both of those guys have talent, and they're young. They're second-year players. Honestly, those 2 kids should be starting.
Yeah, and I think
in your 5 tag.
Yeah, and if you let Carlos Dunlap go and you let Collier go and Rasheem Green's on a contract year, I think
Green's played pretty well.
He's played okay. Yeah.
I'd watch it. I'd watch his market and see if you can bring him back, because he's a guy that he's young. He's played really well this year. He's one of the few defensive linemen that's been noteworthy. And he's a guy that you could bring back, I think, relatively cheap, because he's been hurt for 3 years and this is his one healthy season. And because he's part of a rotation with other guys, he doesn't have the stat line. So I think you can bring him back for a relatively cheap contract, maybe $2 million a year, 2.5. And I would do that because he's a nice rotational piece. But
Kerry Hyder, you're undervaluing him just a little bit there. I think it's probably closer to 4 or 5, but
maybe. And I would be okay with that too. But like I said, I just watch what his market becomes. And I would bring him back, but I'd bring him back before I'd bring back Kerry Hyder. I'd bring him back before I'd bring back Carlos Dunlap at this point.
Well, because Carlos Dunlap is under contract, but we could save, I think it's $3 million. It'd be a like a $5 million dead cap hit, but we'd overall save $3 million, and he wouldn't take up a spot.
But you could also save that $5 million or the $3 million, some of that cap hit, by trading him instead of releasing him.
I don't think that he's got any value right now. Not after this year. No.
You don't think that
he's washed?
Given his history and given the fact that he was good a year ago, that a team looking to make a run, like maybe like the Browns that are looking for a veteran leader, or the Bengals that are trying to put
somebody
stuff together.
Might give you a conditional 7th round pick for him or something.
Or give me a 6th round pick and just take him. Yeah. Just give me a 6th round pick and you.
In fact, you would save I think $5.5 or $6 million. If we traded him after June 1st.
And $5.5, $6 million, or even trade him with the June 1st designation, because you can do that ahead of time. But go ahead and trade him with that June 1st designation, get that 6th or 7th round pick, fine, and use that $5.5 million to bring back Rasheem Green, because he's been the better player.
Yeah. Yeah, and we've got, $56 million, which translates into probably $45 million of real cap to spend next year. We could probably generate a few more dollars here and there. And I'd have to go study the over the cap stuff and just kind of figure it out. But it seems bleak to me. Like there's a bleakness when we talk about all these players and retaining, this and that. And it just seems like there's a lot of holes, a lot of aging players, a lot of players that are mediocre or entering a mediocre phase of their careers, such as Bobby Wagner. Bobby Wagner's a great player, has been a great player, but at some point he's going to wear down after all those tackles. And he's entering that phase where he's not going to be worth 20. He's probably going to be worth closer to 12. You need to get that alignment. I'm fine with that. If we can go another 2 or 3 years with Bobby Wagner, leadership wise on the team at that number, that would be great. And then you've got Jordan Brooks, and then you can build around that a little bit.
Yeah, because if you have it, you can have a guy not be who Bobby Wagner was when he was, just the best linebacker in all of football. You can have a diminished version of him with his leadership skills and that kind of stuff if you've got a Jordan Brooks beside him. Yes. And the way that Jordan Brooks has evolved and become that guy beside him, I'm okay with having a diminished Bobby Wagner.
You can mitigate that too if you invest in your defensive line.
Yeah, but they need to do that. Honestly, at defensive tackle, you've got one player.
Yeah,
you have one player at defensive tackle.
Brian Monet is okay, but again, he's okay. He's a rotation level player in the NFL. There's literally 30 of these guys out there.
He's not a guy you build.
He's not a special guy. In fact, I would argue that Poona Ford just needs help. It's like he alone is not a good enough player. But when you pair him with a really nice player or a Pro Bowl level 3-tech, Poona Ford all of a sudden becomes a really nice player because he's not having to take up so many double teams.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
and part of it is that when you've got Brian Monet, who's 360 pounds, and you've got Al Woods, who's 340 pounds, why are you playing Poona Ford at nose tackle? That seems backwards. Boom. I get that that's where he's been. That's where he's comfortable. He's actually a really good nose tackle, but he has the talent to be super disruptive at 3-tech. And let one of the fat guys be your nose tackle and turn Poona Ford loose. And they haven't done that. It's one of many things I have a problem with this defense, and it comes down to coaching. We talked at the top about of all the different things. If Pete Carroll's going to come back, what does he have to do? He has to bring in a completely different defensive philosophy.
Is the defense the problem, or should we have a new look at a new offensive coordinator again?
No, you need an offensive line that's capable.
I agree.
I
think it's a personnel situation, not a scheme situation.
And the thing is, it might be a scheme situation.
We just don't know.
How do you possibly evaluate that if you don't have an offensive line that can block?
I agree.
And you got a quarterback that's entirely skittish because, and I mean, don't get me wrong, Russell Wilson is playing poorly. I'm not trying to argue otherwise, but he's playing poorly because he's so skittish. He's essentially broken at this point because of how bad the offensive line has been. And if they don't fix the offensive line and get him a chance to be comfortable where he can stop watching the pass rush and start looking downfield again, he's never going to be the same. They have to give him an offensive line. They've got to give him blocking. And until they do, he won't be Russell Wilson again because he doesn't have the athleticism.
They've got to start there. I mean, this has got to be the number 1, number 2, and number 3 issue that they address in the offseason is the offensive line. And literally so. They need a left tackle, they need a center, and they need a right tackle at minimum, plus depth.
And they need a defensive tackle, and they need a starting cornerback.
And they need to redo their entire defensive backfield. To me, right. I mean, there might be Trey Brown, but now we can't count on Trey Brown being back on time.
Yeah,
if
because
you like DJ Reed, that's fine. You like DJ Reed. I think he's just okay. He's not great.
He's great as a number 2, but as your best corner, you're in trouble.
Absolutely. There's just too many athletic, fast wide receivers in the NFL. There just is.
Yeah, and just watching guys like Deebo Samuel, it just
truck him. Truck him.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's so many guys like that in the NFL at receiver right now. You can't have Reed,
a 5'9", 190-pound primary weapon in your backfield to take care of those guys.
He can't be your best. He personally can't be your best corner because he's not good enough to be your best corner. Because what that means is that you don't have an elite corner. You don't have a great corner. He's a good corner. He's a guy that you can have as your second down, or so your second guy on the outside, your
third option,
and he moves inside in the nickel, and you bring in another guy. But he is not he is not a Pro Bowl shutdown corner.
So having said that, Keith, and knowing Trey Brown's coming back from a patella, what do you do? What's your strategy? I don't want to take up too much time. We're going long. That's fine. I knew this was going to be long anyway, but what's your strategy on the defensive backs?
On the defensive backs, I'm looking at a
complete rebuild.
Well, the problem is with Seattle is that because of the way that they run and their scheme and the way that they use that kick step technique, which I know we've talked about in the past. It's just an entirely weird thing that Seattle requires. That's more old school, and it's just not taught. It's actually really technical, and it's a really hard skill to learn. But when you have it, it's really nice. And because nobody else teaches it, no one else requires it because it's just too hard. Is what other teams have decided over the years. Nothing like if you don't have it, you're not going to be able to work in this defense because the Seahawks require it. And every time they've gone and gotten someone from another team, right? No one has come in from another team and done well. Kerry Williams bottomed out and got jettisoned. We thought that, this year, Witherspoon would be the guy because he was at least coming from a similar system, so we knew it. But even he refused to buy in to the kick step stuff because it's new and it's uncomfortable and whatever. If you're going to run that scheme, you need rookies. You have to draft and train. And that's really what it comes down to. And Trey Brown bought in and he looked good. And DJ Reed wasn't a rookie because he had been in San Francisco, but he was
hungry.
He was a guy fighting for his career because he was about to be out of the NFL. And so he bought in and it worked. And honestly, same with Sidney Jones. He's a guy who, if the Seahawks hadn't picked him up out of Jacksonville, he was probably done in the NFL. And so, he was in a situation where he could buy in and do okay. He's not very good, but he's done okay. You've got to go out and draft and develop. If you're going to continue to run the defensive scheme as they want to run it, you have to draft and develop. And you can't just expect to go sign a guy. It's just not that simple.
Sounds like we've got a lot of work to do.
A lot of work to do.
Both on this show and as a franchise.
Yep.
All right. I think that's enough for today. I mean, we're going to have to take this into chunks now and kind of slowly digest the idea even that we're a bad team. And A, I think and B, it's going to make our jobs a little bit more interesting, even though it's hard, because we're going to start talking about things that we haven't had to talk about yet on this show. And some of those things I think we're pretty good at, particularly as it comes towards the draft and rebuilding and all that kind of stuff.
We are pretty good at that.
Be fun. Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun as time goes on. All right, let's get out of here.
Good.
Find Keith at Myers NFL. I'm at NW Seahawk. The show is at Hawks Playbook. Seahawksplaybook.com is your source for all of it. You can find us on your favorite podcast app and YouTube and subscribe on those. And that would be great. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk. Keith is at Myers NFL. And the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.